This case is Maurice M. versus Des Moines Independent Community School District and Heartland Area Education Agency. This decision was provided in August of '04. Some background information on Maurice in general. He was a 15-year-old student at the time of the complaint. Maurice started receiving educational services at the age of 2, and over that time period, he had been diagnosed with ADHD as well as asthma and Crohn's disease and was medicated for each of those things. He received services through a healthcare plan as well as through individual education plans. Some concerns about Maurice, starting with toddlerhood onto middle school. There were some common themes. He tended to have behavior concerns, including defiance and disruption. He had a low average range of intelligence. He lacked confidence and participated in negative self-talk and suffered from anxiety, and also displayed a great deal of verbal aggression. Some accommodations that had worked for him is that he would benefit from clear and consistent expectations, and he did well in structured settings. He benefited from positive behavior supports, and often his function in behaving was escape. He also benefited from a 3-strike program while he was in middle school. The parents' concerns were over a couple-year time period, and so I will kind of just go through all of that, starting with an IEP meeting preceding the last year of middle school, where they prepared his IEP for that following year, and he had goals pretty much across the board. They developed a BIP, or Behavior Intervention Plan, with a 3-strike rule for him, and over that next year he did well with that. During that year, in November, the school held a meeting to plan for the adjustment to high school, and they did adjust the BIP that would then fit that setting better. In December, a meeting was held to assess the assistive technology needs. In January, there was one to work on his healthcare plan, just in preparation for high school. In January, Mom brought the school to pre-mediation because she wanted Maurice moved to an alternate science class because she felt that the teacher was not meeting his needs and following the behavior plan. This resulted in additional services for Maurice, including 2 hours of tutoring each week and a fax machine provided to Mom to help facilitate communication with the school. Then in March of that year, there was an IEP review meeting to discuss behavior and recent suspensions, and the mother felt that the teachers were not using the behavior plan, and with some investigating, it was found that the teachers were not using the plan, that they were giving multiple warnings instead of the 2 warnings, and they were hesitant to use consequences that were in his plan because Maurice continued to be disruptive and then often made threats that his mother would come and be involved. Another finding was that they really needed to do an FBA. Shortly after that finding, in March, later that month in March, the mother withdrew consent to the FBA and to special education classes in writing, and the administrator said that that's not really a very good way to go about that, and there needed to be an IEP meeting, and that she was welcome to ask for an IEP meeting, which she did, but she also then went ahead and filed for due process a couple days later. The next month, there was a district meeting, and she was still advocating for removal of special education and testified that she wanted to remove him from special education because she wanted to open enroll him to a different high school than he would normally be feeding into, and she knew that they were not receiving open enrollment students for special education, only open enrolled students for general ed. So that is why she wanted him removed. That ended up transpiring, and he was able to transfer to Roosevelt for high school. And in June, they met with some officials there and with the team in order to make adjustments to his IEP and to prepare for him behaviorally. They had what they called behavior intervention services there that Mom was not sure that she wanted him to be involved in, but they were able to get him involved in that service and plan that way for him. In September, there was a psychological assessment for him for his 3-year review, and it was determined that everything seemed to be going well, that he was making progress, and that the IEP that he was currently being served by was meeting his needs. In October, the IEP was finalized for the year with an adjusted behavior plan. Mom was under the understanding at this time that the 3-strike program that was from the previous school would be continued, whereas the school felt that this was a clean slate for him and he could start any program that they felt would best meet his needs. The program revolved around what they called a level 2 room, whereas basically he received some verbal warnings and then he would be removed to that level 2 room where he would have alternate processing, some crisis intervention processing, and go through his thinking errors and things like that. The plan that they set up did not indicate any strategies for unstructured areas such as the hall or before or after school, and the school officials ended up testifying later that this was not feasible and not a realistic need that could be met. Additionally, there was no positive strategies built into the plan. The plan, once it was released to the teachers and explained to everyone, really increased the level 2 referrals, and then this ended up having an adverse effect on Maurice, his attitudes towards school, and his participation. At this point, there was his behavior just really skyrocketed, his negative behaviors really skyrocketed in those non-structured settings. And then his mother asked at this point to be notified of any situations, as well as to homework and different things, and have better communication. Shortly after that, there was another behavior incident, and Mom argued that it was a lack of communication and not following the appropriate plan, and these were the major issues that were feeding his behavior. In December, there was a mediation for his behavior intervention plan, and it was modified a great deal to include a lot of contact with Mom. There was a lot of, instead of just going straight to the level 2 room, he was allowed to seek out preferred individuals in the building. If those preferred individuals were not available, he could call his mom. Most offenses, interactions that he had with even preferred individuals ended up with a phone call to Mom, and Mom would decide when he was ready to go back to the classroom. And this continued on. The school testified that they did not feel like this was in the best interest of Maurice, but because of the mediation around it and Mom's demands, they went ahead with it. In May, there was a manifestation determination IEP meeting because of Maurice had been suspended now for 9 days and was facing another suspension, so would need to have that manifestation determination. They did determine that the behavior was a manifestation of his disability, but that they still felt that he needed to be sent to an alternative placement. Real quick here, this is where this major decision comes up. This is Mom was saying, no, he does not need to go to an alternative placement. He needs to stay at Roosevelt and be served here. He's been served here for a year and has done well. He needs to remain in this placement. The school then says, no, he can't stay here. He's had lots of these behavior issues. He is monopolizing some of the teachers' times. His 3 preferred individuals in the building, he was spending a lot of time with them, and that was detrimental to other students, and that he would be better served at a behavior school. The applicable laws here are the least restrictive environment is the biggest one that really comes into play, including the 3 considerations, the supplemental aids and services, the benefit of the least restrictive environment, and the detriment to the child. Additionally, there was manifestation determination law involved. There was behavior intervention plans and services. There was IEP-related laws and FAPE laws, but it really came down to least restrictive environment. The final decision was that was concerning the least restrictive environment, that The first question being the supplemental aids and services, were they provided? The district failed to show that Maurice's goals and objectives could not be implemented at Roosevelt, and that they could not provide those supplemental aids and services, and that they also had not fully supplied all the things that they could have in order to help his behavior and performance. The educational benefit of the least restrictive environment, the district failed to show that a more restrictive environment was necessary for him, and that he needed that to benefit from his program. The progress monitoring data and the testimony from the people in the school showed that Maurice had made gains in all IEP goal areas that year that he had been at Roosevelt. And the detrimental effect to the child, the district argued that it was a detriment of taxing the teacher's time, and that there was a lack of budget to accommodate Maurice's needs, that some of the classes that he had been benefiting from and the accommodations he'd been benefiting from had been cut due to budget cuts. And they said that the lack of budget to accommodate Maurice would be detrimental to him, and it was ruled that it was not sufficient, that the district didn't prove that the placement was detrimental. So overall, the appellant prevailed, and Roosevelt was not proven to be unable to provide free and appropriate education, and that a more restrictive placement was not needed, or they didn't prove that it was needed, and so it was decided that it was not needed. My personal response is that this is an appropriate finding, that it makes perfectly good sense. The school had served him well for a year. He had made progress on all of his goals and had done well. So there was really no need to move him to a behavioral setting. He had behavior concerns, but I don't feel like he had proper services, in that he did not have a behavior plan for the least structured times of the day, which was apparent in all of his documentation would be his biggest struggle. So the school could have done more to provide for those areas. If he was struggling with that support, they might have had more of a case, but because he wasn't given that support, I think that this was completely appropriate. There was some talk in the papers and in the testimony about mom over advocating for her child, and it's really important, as I came away from this looking at it, saying that the IEP team needs to find consensus, but they also need to fully support Maurice. At this point, there were things that they really felt strongly were not in Maurice's best interest, but they went along with because mom was asking for it. And it seemed like that's really not the best approach. At some point, you need to stick up for the child's best interest, even if that means continuing education to mom, like really explaining things fully, showing her the benefit that Maurice would get from a situation that you feel strongly about. And then I felt, in relation to that, the IEP team and the administrators and the teachers might have gone further to reach mom, to really get her on board with some of the things, that maybe there could have been more that they could have done. The implications of this case is that there's a great responsibility of the team to include parents' ideas, but they also need to provide for the needs of the child. Additionally, that budget constraints aren't an excuse to not meet the needs of children with special education needs. And then lastly, the theme across the board is that communication is really important, and that communication is tied to relationships, and sometimes that little bit of extra effort to build and maintain those relationships with parents can really pay off. Some questions for thought. What are your thoughts on how to best balance parental concerns and the best interest of the child when they do not appear to be fully aligned? And then the second one, step into both the administrator and the parent's shoes and provide an idea or two from each perspective on how you could have avoided this conflict. Thank you very much, and have a nice day.